For years after she walked out of that glass building, Mira returned to the city that once broke her. It looked the same. Steel towers piercing clouds, traffic roaring like an endless argument, the skyline glowing gold under a tired sun. But she was not the same. This time, she arrived not by subway, but by car, a quiet black sedan with tinted windows and leather seats that smelled of new beginnings. As the driver pulled up to the intersection, Mira looked out at the crowds crossing the street. Hurried faces, corporate badges, coffee cups, ambition leaking from every movement. She remembered being one of them, small, invisible, trying to fit into a rhythm that never belonged to her. Now, she was here to rewrite the rhythm. Her company, Tran Advisory Group, had grown beyond expectation. 3 regional offices, a client list filled with venture-backed firms, and investors whispering her name like a secret they didn't want others to find out. Her newest deal, a potential acquisition partnership with a mid-tier consultancy struggling with internal debt. She knew the name well. Eastbridge Financial Consulting, her old company, the same one whose glass doors once closed behind her like a sentence. When her assistant mentioned the potential buyout, Mira had smiled only slightly. Schedule the meeting, she'd said. No hesitation, no visible emotion. But that night, she couldn't sleep. She sat by her window, watching the city lights blur through the glass. It was a revenge she felt, not exactly. It was symmetry, the universe coming full circle in silence. They once laughed at how I spoke, she thought. Now they'll measure every word I say. The morning of the meeting, she dressed carefully. A tailored white suit, minimalist, precise. A silver brooch, small but deliberate. Hair swept back, revealing calm eyes that gave nothing away. In the mirror, she didn't see the girl who once rehearsed English pronunciation at night. She saw an investor who owned time itself. Her driver opened the door. "Back to Eastbridge, ma'am?" She smiled faintly. "Let's see if they still remember my name." When she stepped into the lobby, everything smelled of money, polished marble, espresso, and quiet panic. The receptionist looked up, confused. "Good morning. You have an appointment?" "Yes," Mira said, "with your CEO." The woman typed quickly, eyes widening. Of course, Miss Tran. They're expecting you." She walked toward the elevators, heels clicking against the floor. Slow, even deliberate. Each sound was a memory turned into rhythm. Click, click, click. The same sound she once heard from someone walking away after mocking her. Now, it was the sound of return. When the elevator doors opened, she stepped out into the same hallway, familiar walls, same cold light, same faint hum of air conditioning. Even the artwork hadn't changed. Time had moved, but arrogance hadn't. She entered the boardroom. Thomas was there. Older, heavier, still performing confidence. Rachel, too. Thinner, louder, her laughter echoing too easily. When they saw her, both froze. "Mira," Thomas said, blinking. "Is that you?" She smiled, polite but distant. "Good morning. Thank you for meeting with me." Rachel forced a laugh. "Wow, it's been, what, years? You look amazing." "Success suits me," Mira said softly. They sat down. The CEO cleared his throat. "Well, Miss Tran, we appreciate your interest in Eastbridge. The firm has faced transitional challenges, but with your investment—" "I'm not here to invest," she interrupted, gently. Silence. He frowned. "I'm sorry." Mira leaned forward, voice calm, deliberate. "I'm here to discuss acquisition. My company intends to buy a controlling stake." The room froze. Thomas blinked. "By Eastbridge." His voice cracked on the word. "Yes," she said. "I've already spoken with your board. They're open to negotiation." Rachel's lips parted slightly. "But why us?" Mira met her eyes, steady. Because you taught me everything I needed to know about your weaknesses. For a moment, no one spoke. Only the faint hum of the AC filled the room. Then Thomas laughed, trying to recover control. Ah, I see. The student becomes the master. Huh? That's poetic. Mira smiled, faintly. Poetry isn't really my strength. Profit is. She slid a folder across the table. Inside, valuation reports, debt summaries, and projected buyout terms. Numbers so precise they cut like glass. Thomas flipped through them, his confidence dissolving with every page. How did you? I listen, she said simply. Always have. The meeting ended quietly. There were no arguments, no raised voices, just signatures, forced smiles, and the slow realization that the balance had shifted forever. As she stood to leave, Thomas extended his hand. Congratulations, Miss Tran. I suppose we'll be working under you soon. She looked at his hand for a moment, then shook it lightly. Don't worry, Thomas. I'll be a better boss than you were. His smile faltered. Hers didn't. Outside the building, the air felt different. The wind was sharp, clean, almost celebratory. She paused on the sidewalk, looking up at the tower's mirrored surface. It reflected her face, calm, unreadable, unstoppable. In that reflection, she saw two versions of herself overlapping. The young woman clutching reports, trembling, humiliated, and the one standing now, powerful, silent, in control. You came back, she whispered to her reflection. Not to remember, but to replace. She turned, walked toward her car, and never looked back. Voiceover fades in softly. When I left, they laughed. When I returned, they smiled. And between laughter and smiles, there's only one difference. Ownership. The papers were signed. Eastbridge was officially under Mira's umbrella. No celebration. No champagne. Just a quiet email sent at 2:14 p.m. confirming the transfer of controlling interest. To everyone else, it looked like another strategic acquisition. But Mira knew it was a reckoning. The first time she walked through the offices as owner, the air felt different. Not to her, but to them. Every whisper stopped when she passed. Every conversation softened. She didn't need to raise her voice. Her presence did the work. The glass walls still gleamed, but beneath the shine, she could see it, the cracks. Not in the building, in the people. Years of arrogance had hollowed them out. Managers who feared decisions. Departments bloated with titles, but empty of ideas. A leadership team fluent in excuses. It was like inheriting a palace built on sand. Thomas still sat in his old office, pretending to be in control. When she entered, he stood quickly, forcing a smile. Miss Tran, welcome back. Things have changed since your time here. She smiled faintly. I can see that. Her eyes moved across the room. The same walls, same desk, same awards. But the photo on the wall had changed. A leadership portrait without her in it. She paused, tilting her head. Where's the 2016 team photo? She asked. Thomas hesitated. We updated it. Of course, she said softly. You erased history the same way you erase talent. He didn't answer. She didn't need him to. That afternoon, she sat in the boardroom with the department heads. Sunlight poured through the glass, casting long shadows across the table. She listened as they spoke, jargon, excuses, blame shifting. Every voice sounded like a faint echo of the past. Finally, she raised a hand. Stop. Silence. Her voice was calm, low, controlled. You're speaking a language that sounds professional, but says nothing. The numbers don't care about your opinions. The clients don't care about your egos. Someone cleared his throat nervously. With respect, Miss Tran, morale has been low since the market shift. Morale, she interrupted, is what people say when they've already given up. She leaned forward slightly. I built a company in a one-room apartment above a laundromat, with 5 clients and no marketing budget. You've had millions in resources, and you're still waiting for permission to perform. No one met her eyes. Tomorrow, she said, every department will submit an honest report. Not the version you send to impress. The truth. I want to know exactly where the rot begins. Then she stood and left. That night, she walked the empty corridors alone. The lights hummed softly, the air conditioning whispering like ghosts. She stopped in front of the meeting room, that room. The memory returned in fragments. Laughter, a cough, the word fluent. The young woman standing there clutching her papers, trying not to cry. She placed her hand on the glass wall. Cold, smooth, clean. The reflection, staring back, wasn't the same woman. You built a world that laughed at you, she whispered. Now you own its silence. The next morning, her assistant, Clara, entered with a tablet full of reports. Miss Tran, you should see this. One by one, the files revealed the truth. Forged invoices, inflated expenses, unreported client losses. Every department had been hiding numbers to protect themselves. It wasn't just inefficiency. It was decay. Mira read quietly, face unreadable. When she finished, she said simply, "Schedule a full audit." Clara hesitated. That could expose a lot. That's the point. By the end of the week, rumors swirled like dust. Some said she was cutting half the staff. Some said she was here to liquidate everything. Others whispered she was a ghost from the past, haunting them with a smile. Mira said nothing. She didn't need to. She just watched. And as she watched, she noticed something no one else did. Fear was spreading faster than truth. And fear was efficient. When Thomas finally came to her office, he was pale, sweating. "Mira, Ms. Tran, you can't just fire people. The team is panicking. We'll lose what little trust we have left." She looked up from her laptop. "Trust," she said quietly. "You lost that years ago. I'm just uncovering the corpse." He exhaled shakily. "You've changed." She smiled faintly. "No, Thomas. You just never looked close enough." By month's end, Eastbridge looked nothing like before. Desks emptied. Emails stopped. The noise died. But something new filled the space. Order. Data that made sense. Teams that actually worked. And for the first time in years, profit margins shifted upward. Mira walked the halls, calm as a surgeon. Every decision was precise, every move measured. She didn't rebuild the company. She resurrected it. One Friday evening, she stood by the window of the executive floor, watching the city below. The skyline glowed gold again, like it had years ago, but this time she was looking down at it. Behind her, Clara spoke softly. "The audit reports are complete. You were right. Most of the corruption started at the top." "Thomas..." Clara nodded. Mira didn't look surprised. "Let him resign quietly. Dignity costs nothing, and it buys silence." When Clara left, Mira stayed by the glass. The office behind her was quiet. No laughter, no whispers. Just the hum of machines, the rhythm of control. She closed her eyes and let the silence sink in. "They said my accent was the problem," she murmured. Turns out, it was the only voice that ever made sense. The city outside pulsed with light, alive, chaotic, desperate. Inside, Mira stood still, calm, unbothered, complete. She had finally rebuilt the empire that once rejected her. But deep down, she knew this was only the beginning of something bigger. Something inevitable. Voiceover fades with a slow violin and city hum. You don't destroy an empire by shouting at it. You buy it, one silent signature at a time. By the time the headlines called Eastbridge revived, Myra's name was nowhere in them. She preferred it that way. Let the world applaud the shell. She owned the core. On paper, Eastbridge was under new management, a neutral CEO appointed by the investors. In reality, the investors were her. Her shares were scattered across holding companies with names so ordinary they vanished into financial noise. Linares Group, TNA Capital, Havenstone Advisors. Different addresses, different signatures, but every line traced back to one woman, invisible, quiet, and deliberate. Mira had become what every corporation feared most. An owner you couldn't see, a storm you couldn't predict. Her days no longer belonged to meetings or memos. They belonged to silence, the kind that hums with calculation. She worked from her private office overlooking the skyline, the blinds half drawn, city lights spilling in like liquid gold. The walls were bare, except for one framed quote in silver. Power is best used when no one knows who holds it. She believed that, because power that's visible invites resistance. But power unseen, it shapes the air itself. One morning, Clara walked in with a portfolio of documents. "Miss Tran," she said quietly, "the press keeps asking who the real investor is. Eastbridge's recovery has everyone talking." Mira didn't look up. Let them talk. They'll get bored eventually. And if they don't, Mira turned a page in her file. Then they'll start guessing. And guessing is better than knowing. Clara hesitated. You could become the face of the success story. People would respect that. Mira smiled faintly. Respect fades. Mystery lasts. Behind her, the city buzzed with energy, unaware that every contract, every major loan, every expansion plan now ran through her signature, hidden behind 3 layers of shell companies. She didn't just own Eastbridge. She owned its competitors' debts, its suppliers' supply chains, even the landlords of the buildings they leased. When she walked down the street, no one turned their heads, but she could walk past 5 companies and quietly own 4 of them. At night, she reviewed acquisition reports, silent wars fought with numbers, not guns. Sometimes she thought of the laughter from years ago, those glass walls and careless words. They still echoed, but softer now, like memories losing strength. She didn't hate them anymore. Hate was noisy, and she'd learned to speak fluently in silence. One Thursday evening, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered. "Miss Tran," a man's voice said. Smooth, practiced. "We represent an investment consortium from London. We've been studying your work quietly, as you prefer." "I see," she replied. "We're interested in a partnership, but our board would like to meet the person truly behind Tran Advisory and Eastbridge's turnaround." Mira paused. "They've already met me. They just don't know it." Silence on the other end. Then a soft laugh. "Clever, but not forever. Eventually, the world will want a face to worship." "I'm not here to be worshipped," she said. "I'm here to be obeyed." The call ended. That night, she stood by the window again. The skyline stretched before her, lights blinking like constellations of power. She whispered to the reflection in the glass. When they can't see where the power comes from, they obey faster. In the distance, she could almost see the building where it all began, Eastbridge Tower. She wondered if Thomas still came in early, still pretended to matter. Probably not. The world moves on, she thought, and the ones who can't keep up become footnotes in someone else's success story. Weeks later, she attended a private investor gala under one of her company aliases. Different name, different accent. The room was filled with people who believed they ran the world, hedge fund directors, corporate lawyers, political advisors. She floated among them like a ghost wearing silk, smiling, listening, speaking only when necessary. No one recognized her. At one point, she overheard a man boasting near the bar. "Eastbridge is lucky. Whoever their backer is, genius move. If I knew who it was, I'd invest blind. Mira smiled. Maybe you already have. He chuckled. You sound like you know something. I know everything worth knowing, she said softly, then walked away. Later that night, she returned home to find a single envelope on her desk. No return address. Inside, a printed newspaper clipping. Eastbridge's mysterious investor. Who is she? The subheadline read, Rumors circulate that the company's savior may be a woman of foreign descent. Beneath it, an old photograph, her, years ago, from a forgotten staff page. Young, nervous, smiling too hard. She stared at it for a long time. Then, slowly, she tore the page in half. Let them guess, she murmured. They're always wrong about women like me. The following morning, she held a virtual meeting with her private board, 4 trusted advisors, all women from countries once overlooked. Vietnam, Nigeria, India, Colombia, each of them with a story like hers, mocked, dismissed, underestimated. We move quietly, Mira told them. No press, no noise, just results. One of them asked, and if they try to uncover us? Mira smiled, faintly. Then we let them. By the time they figure it out, they'll already be working for us. As the meeting ended, Mira looked once more at the city beyond her glass walls. It glittered, unaware that beneath the surface, she was pulling the strings that made its heartbeat steady. The louder they speak, she whispered, the more I win. She turned off the lights, her reflection merging with the city lights outside. For a moment, she seemed to disappear. A ghost of power, unseen but everywhere. Voiceover fades in low and haunting. They wanted me to sound perfect. I learned to sound invisible, and invisibility is the highest form of fluency. The morning began with rain, soft at first, then steady, a rhythm against glass that seemed to echo Mira's calm. From her car window, the city shimmered through streaks of water. Somewhere beyond those towers, a meeting was about to start, one that would decide the fate of Eastbridge once and for all. Mira didn't look nervous. She looked precise. Every detail was intentional. The white tailored suit, the silver watch, the faint scent of cedar and jasmine. Power in its quietest form. In the boardroom, the executives were already waiting. Thomas sat near the center, face pale, voice force steady. Rachel typed something into her phone, pretending calm. The air was thick with unease, that heavy, polite silence people wear when they know the world is about to tilt. The door opened. Every conversation stopped. Mira entered. She didn't rush. Her heels clicked softly on the marble floor, echoing through the glass room. She carried no laptop, no folder, only a small notebook and a fountain pen. When she reached the head of the table, she paused. Good morning, she said evenly. Her voice, the same accent they once mocked, filled the room like music that didn't need volume. Thomas rose halfway, then awkwardly sat again. Mira, Ms. Tran. It's been 5 years, she finished for him. 5 years, 2 months, and 16 days since I left this building. No one moved. She placed her notebook on the table, then looked around slowly. The same glass walls, the same skyline view, the same painting of a cityscape behind them. Everything was the same, except her. I asked for this meeting, she began, to make something clear. The rumors about Eastbridge's ownership are true. I am the majority shareholder. This company belongs to me. Gasps rippled through the room, like wind through tall grass. Rachel blinked rapidly. You? But that's impossible. You left. Yes, Mira said softly. And you laughed. Remember? Rachel's face drained of color. Thomas tried to speak, but the words stuck in his throat. Mira turned to him. You told me I didn't fit the company's brand. that clients might struggle to understand my accent. Do you remember that? Thomas swallowed. I was trying to help you. No, she interrupted gently. You were trying to silence me, but you taught me something valuable that day. She leaned forward slightly. You taught me that clarity doesn't come from how you speak. It comes from who listens. No one dared move. The rain outside drummed harder, like the world applauding softly from beyond the glass. Mira opened her notebook, flipping to a single page, a list of departments, all neatly reorganized. This company, she said, will no longer be run by noise. It will be run by precision. There will be no more meetings that produce nothing, no more promotions for arrogance, no more decisions made by ego. Her tone was calm, not anger, not pride, just finality. She pointed to the new structure. Several names were already crossed out. Effective today, I'm restructuring leadership. Some of you will step down. Some of you will stay. None of you will decide. Her eyes met Thomas's. You're retiring? Thomas, consider it early mercy. He stared at her, speechless. I built this company. You built a monument to yourself. Mira said, I'm turning it back into a business. Rachel's voice trembled. And me? Mira looked at her, not unkindly. You'll stay, for now. You're ambitious, Rachel, but ambition without humility destroys everything it touches. Learn that, and you might survive. Rachel nodded, eyes wet. Mira closed her notebook, signaling the end of her speech. But before she left, she paused and turned back. There's something else, she said quietly. When I was here, I used to stand in this very room, afraid to speak. Afraid my voice wasn't good enough. That fear built your comfort. Now, my silence builds your salary. She smiled, not cruelly, but with a kind of peace. Consider it balance. For a moment, no one spoke. Even the hum of the projector stopped, as if the air itself refused to interrupt her. Mira picked up her pen and wrote a single sentence on the corner of the whiteboard. Respect doesn't come from fluency. It comes from consequence. She capped the pen and turned to leave. As she walked out, Thomas whispered to Rachel, I never thought she'd come back. Mira stopped at the door, hearing him clearly. Without turning, she said, I didn't come back, Thomas. I arrived. Then she left the room, her reflection disappearing into the glass hallway like a ghost fulfilled. Outside, the rain had stopped. The city glittered, washed clean, reborn. Her driver opened the door, but Mira stood for a moment, breathing in the damp air. Somewhere high above, sunlight began to break through the clouds. She thought of the young woman she once was, standing in this same building, trembling, humiliated. Now, that memory no longer hurt. It simply existed, like the first line of a story that had finally found its ending. You can mock someone's accent, she whispered to herself, but you can't mock the results. She stepped into the car, the door closing softly behind her. As the vehicle pulled away, the city reflected on the tinted glass. Her city now, her empire. Voiceover fades in with slow orchestral strings. The meeting they once laughed through was the last meeting they ever controlled. I spoke the same words, but this time they listened. The signing ceremony was set for 10 a.m. sharp. A simple room, a glass table, 2 pens, no photographers, no press, just signatures, the quiet kind that end empires. Mira arrived 5 minutes early. She always did. The room smelled of new paper and old power. Sunlight spilled across the polished floor, turning everything gold and unreal. It was the kind of light that used to blind her when she sat on the other side of this very building, trying to be seen. Now, the light followed her. Thomas was already there, seated at the far end. His suit was crisp, but his hands trembled slightly as he flipped through the documents. When he saw her, he forced a smile. Mira, or should I say Ms. Tran? She nodded politely. Whatever helps you sleep, Thomas. He laughed weakly. I see success hasn't changed your sense of humor. It's the only thing that hasn't. They both sat. The lawyers shuffled papers, their pens clicking nervously, the sound of finality. Rachel entered a few minutes later. She looked different now, thinner, quieter, humbled. Mira, she said softly, congratulations. Mira studied her for a moment. Thank you. You've grown. Rachel smiled faintly. Fear is an effective teacher. Mira nodded once. So is regret. The head lawyer cleared his throat. Ladies and gentlemen, as per the agreement, today marks the complete transfer of Eastbridge assets to Tran Advisory Holdings. Once these documents are signed, Ms. Tran becomes the full and legal owner. The words hung in the air, heavy and irreversible. Thomas shifted in his seat. You know, when I hired you all those years ago, I saw potential. Mira smiled slightly. No, Thomas, you saw obedience. You mistook it for potential. He exhaled slowly. And now, she said, you see consequence. The lawyer handed her the pen. It gleamed under the light, heavy, engraved with the company's old logo. For a moment, she hesitated, not because she doubted, but because she remembered the laughter in that first meeting room, the humiliation, the long nights in a cheap apartment working under a single bulb, the smell of rain the day she resigned. Every moment folded into this one gesture. She signed. One stroke. 2, 3. The ink bled smoothly, final and absolute. When she finished, the lawyer turned the papers toward Thomas. He stared at them, jaw tight. Then he signed too, quick, resigned, his pen shaking slightly. When the last page was done, the lawyer collected everything, nodding. Congratulations, Miss Tran. Eastbridge is now yours. A pause. Then applause. Polite, restrained, uncertain. Mira stood. No need for that, she said softly. This isn't a celebration. It's a correction. She walked to the window, looking out at the skyline. The same city that once seemed too large to belong to her. Below, people hurried through the streets, unaware that history had just shifted quietly above their heads. Thomas came to stand beside her. You won, Mira. Completely. You could have destroyed me, but you didn't. She looked at him, her voice calm. I didn't come to destroy you, Thomas. I came to show you what respect looks like when it finally gets paid back, with interest. He nodded, defeated but oddly peaceful. You were always better than us. No, she said, just quieter. Rachel approached, hesitant. What happens now? Mira turned toward her team, a few loyal employees from both companies. Now, she said, we build something clean. A company where no one is silenced for sounding different. Where language isn't a wall, it's a bridge. Rachel looked down. And the others? They'll adapt, Mira replied. Or vanish. That's the beauty of evolution. The meeting ended, and one by one, the old executives left the room. Thomas lingered, standing in the doorway. He turned back once. You know, I never thought I'd see the day when you'd own this place. Mira met his gaze. Neither did I. But here we are. He nodded slowly, eyes glassy. Goodbye, Mira. Goodbye, Thomas. The door closed softly behind him. For a moment, the room was still. Mira exhaled, not relief, not triumph. Something quieter. Closure. She walked to the table, picked up the pen she'd used, and examined it. Old logo, old world, old rules. She slipped it into her purse. A souvenir, she murmured, from the day silence signed louder than words. Outside, the rain had stopped. The clouds parted, revealing a pale, forgiving sun. She stepped out of the building and looked up at the Eastbridge sign. Her name would replace it soon. But for now, she let it stay. Let the world take its time to realize the change. Let the arrogance fade, naturally, like dust in sunlight. A journalist standing nearby called out, "Ms. Tran, is it true you're now the sole owner of Eastbridge?" Mira turned slightly, her voice calm but resonant. "It's true, but ownership was never the goal." "Then what was?" She smiled, understanding. And with that, she walked away, into the crowd, into the hum of the city that once rejected her, now carrying her name in every whispered deal. That night, she stood by her apartment window, the same view, but a different woman. The city lights blinked like quiet applause. She poured a glass of wine, lifted it gently, and whispered, "To the laughter that taught me silence, to the silence that taught me power." She took a sip, eyes glimmering with calm. And to every woman who was ever told her voice didn't fit the room, speak anyway, or better yet, buy the room. Voiceover fades in with piano and string ensemble. I didn't conquer them. I outlasted them. And in the end, that's the same thing.
The office was empty. Evening light pooled across the marble floor, soft and golden, the color of endings that feel like beginnings. Mira stood by the window, her reflection fading into the skyline. The city below glowed like a circuit board, every light, every heartbeat, connected to the empire she had built from silence. Tomorrow, the new sign would go up. Tran Global Advisory. Simple, clean, final. She had considered changing the building entirely. New walls, new colors, new furniture, but no. She wanted the ghost to stay. She wanted every corridor, every glass panel, to remember who had walked them before. "Let the building whisper the story," she murmured. "It's louder that way." On her desk lay the pen she had used to sign the takeover. Next to it, the small USB drive, the same one she'd carried out of this office years ago when she was nobody. She picked it up, turning it between her fingers. A piece of plastic in memory. Everything she had built began with what was inside this. Data, reports, long nights, humiliation turned into planning. She smiled faintly. "You and I," she whispered to it. "We were underestimated." Then she placed it inside a small glass case. Not a trophy, a reminder. Clara entered quietly. "Miss Tran, everyone's gone. Would you like me to close up?" Mira nodded. "Thank you, Clara. Go home. Rest. Tomorrow will be busy." Clara hesitated. "Before I go, may I say something?" "Of course." Clara's eyes glimmered. "When I first joined your company, people laughed at my accent too. But you never corrected me. You never made me feel small." Myra's expression softened. "Why would I? The sound of your voice tells me where you've been. That's not something to erase." Clara smiled, wiping a tear quickly. "Good night, Miss Tran." "Good night, Clara." When the door closed, silence settled again, but this time it was gentle. Mira walked slowly across the office. Every reflection in the glass felt like an echo of her past self, all the versions of her that had survived, layer upon layer, until only the truest one remained. She sat down, opened her notebook, and wrote the last entry. "There is a strange peace in being heard at last, not because your voice changed, but because the world finally learned how to listen." She closed the notebook, her fingers resting on the cover. Outside, thunder rumbled faintly, far away. It wasn't a storm, just weather passing through. She smiled. "Let it rain," she whispered. "It's always been my cue to begin." The next morning arrived clear and bright. Mira stood outside the building, surrounded by staff, cameras, and a small crowd of onlookers. The press waited for her to speak, microphones raised. One of the reporters called out, "Ms. Tran, after all these years, how does it feel to own Eastbridge, the company that once fired you?" Mira smiled, slow and measured. "It feels quiet," she said. A murmur of confusion rippled through the crowd. She continued, "You see, revenge is loud. But justice, real justice, doesn't need volume." It only needs time. Another reporter asked, Do you have anything to say to those who mocked you back then? Mira looked up at the new sign being unveiled. Tran Global Advisory. Her name gleamed in the morning light. She answered softly, They gave me the one thing they never meant to, clarity. They taught me how not to be them. The crowd went silent. The cameras clicked. But she wasn't performing for them. She was speaking to the ghosts still lingering in the glass above. Later, as the event ended, Mira walked through the lobby alone. Her heels echoed against the marble, each step a punctuation mark in the story she'd written with her life. When she reached the elevator, she paused and looked at her reflection one last time. Years ago, she had seen a woman trembling here, humiliated, unheard. Now, she saw someone else entirely. Composed. Whole. Free. She whispered, almost smiling, You made it. In your own accent. Then the elevator doors closed, sealing the moment like a full stop at the end of a very long sentence. That evening, she returned home. Her apartment was still modest, still filled with the same scent of jasmine tea and rain. She poured herself a cup, sat by the window, and watched the city breathe. She thought about all the people she'd met, the ones who doubted her, the ones who believed, the ones who disappeared. She didn't feel anger, only gratitude. They built walls, she thought. And I built doors. She reached for her old laptop. Yes, the one with scratches and faded keys, and opened a blank document. On the top line, she typed, Chapter 1, The Sound of Becoming. Maybe one day she would write it all down, not as a story of revenge, but as a story of translation, the way pain becomes power and silence becomes language. As the night deepened, the city lights blurred into soft gold outside her window. She leaned back in her chair, eyes half closed, listening, not to music, not to the hum of traffic, but to the echo of her own heartbeat. It was steady, fluent, free. Voiceover begins, low and cinematic. They mocked the way I spoke, not knowing they were teaching me to listen. They silenced me, not knowing I was learning how to build an empire out of silence. And when I finally spoke again, the world called it power,